Got some new bumper music for you, folks.
This book is a little bit of Christian missionary propaganda.
And he perhaps is based upon a well-known literary figure, or perhaps even a historical figure.
Now, didymus is simply the Greek word for twin. It's also used as the Greek word for testicles, for obvious reasons. There are usually two of them.
She kissed them.
Your fruit shall be without root, and your shoots shall be dried up like a branch scorched by a strong wind.
How many of you find this child Jesus an adorable, little, cute little baby? Nobody? Good.
I sprinkled my body with the bathwater that his mother had used to wash him off, and in that instant I was healed.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude, not far from the redneck Mecca. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts and Buddha are curled up together on the couch next to me. Ash and Lord Squeakington are in my row. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. This is a Gnostic text episode where Skullbeard and I read a few chapters from some Gnostic text, and I don't remember what one it is now, and I haven't edited the file yet, so I don't know. But it's something. Next episode will be a news episode. Well, after I recorded the last episode, things got a little bit interesting for me. On Thursday, I had to go to the store to get a few things. I was the only person in the store wearing a mask, and when I stopped at another store, I was still the only person wearing a mask. That wasn't the interesting part, though. That happened on the way home. I'm carrying a big old bag of cat food on my shoulder, and as I'm going along on the sidewalk, I can see that a cop has his car pulled over to the side ahead of me. There's a plant nursery right there, and they've got all kinds of trees near the sidewalk, so I couldn't really see much as I approached. When I got closer, I see that the cop is talking to someone who I assume was the driver of the car. She was a white gal, probably in her early 20s, standing behind the car as she was talking. My immediate thought was that she didn't get pulled over, but had pulled over because there was something wrong with the car, and the cop was talking to her about it. Then, the person who was obviously the driver crawled out of the car on the passenger side. And I should point out there's a wide median on this stretch of road, so you could actually park your car up against the sidewalk and open the driver's side door and not be anywhere near the traffic lane. That's a kind of key here in what comes next. Then the person who was obviously the driver crawled out of the car on the passenger side. He was a young black male. I have seen any number of people get pulled over on that stretch of road, and while I've seen the cops talk to people through the passenger side window, usually they stand at the driver's side. I can't recall ever seeing the police have anyone get out of their cars before, though that's happened. As I walked past the scene, I debated if I should stop and start videoing the whole thing or not, but I decided against it. My rationale was that I didn't think that the police would do anything, it being such an open area. Because while it was hard for me to see anything as I walked up, anyone across the street or driving by, and there was plenty of traffic, would easily be able to see what was happening. That's the last time I will do that. I gave the couple a bit of a nod as I walked past them, as you do to acknowledge that you see the other person and aren't going to blunder into them. I continue along on my merry way for about a block when I hear someone yelling at me. I turn around, and there's a different cop who's pulled over and wanting me to come to talk to him. he asked me for my name and my identification. This got my dander up a bit, and instead of simply complying, I asked him why. His response was that he was looking for someone who had a blue backpack. I pointed out to him that this wasn't much of a description to go on, and that I didn't have a car, I walked everywhere, and everybody knew me as a bit of a freak show since I tended to ride a Razor scooter. I debated about pulling out my phone and videoing the whole thing, but I didn't. The cop and I had a bit of back and forth for a few minutes, which mostly consisted of him trying to get me to confess that I had done something wrong. When I asked him why they were looking for whomever it was that they were looking for, he said that they had a warrant out for the guy. Naturally, I asked the cop what the warrant was for. He said he didn't know, and I told him that I didn't buy that at all. If I hadn't lost my cool, I probably could have gotten some better digs in at him, but I was pretty pissed at this point. He kept pressing me for my name and ID and said, "You're not in handcuffs, you don't have anything to worry about." At which point I responded with, "Have you been watching the news? I mean, I know I'm white, but come on." His reply to that was, "We're just having a casual..." His reply to that was, "We're just having a consensual conversation." So I looked at him and said, "Not anymore," and walked off. When I turned around to go away from him, I pulled my phone out of my pocket to have it at the ready, so if anything happened, I could start filming. I am absolutely certain that the reason I was stopped was because of that nod I gave to the couple I had passed. The officer was no doubt hoping that I knew the couple and would spill the beans on them about something. Given that I'm lucky, there's very little that will happen to me in a confrontation with the police due to my lack of pigmentation, I might as well put that to good use and just start filming them every time I see them pulling someone over or wanting to talk to me. Who knows, I may even save a life by doing so. Which means, if you're friends with me on Facebook and you see that I have suddenly decided to go live on Facebook, it's because there's something happening with the popos and you might want to watch. Only other thing that really happened this week was yesterday I went to a different store to get some things. I have this idea to put up some curtains, since a couple of the fur balls like nothing better than climbing on them, and the curtain rods you can buy are really flimsy and they don't have very good mounts to the wall. I had this really, I guess you'd call it bonkers idea. If you're familiar with the genre steampunk, there's a related genre called diesel punk. And if you're not familiar with either one, I'll explain to you. The idea is that in both of these genres, they're stories written by modern authors set in that time that are science fiction stories. If you've ever seen the movie Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, that's a diesel punk movie. You could argue that the first Captain America movie was a diesel punk movie because the German plane that he crashes into the ocean, spoiler alert, near the end of the film is one that never existed, really. The Germans had a similar concept, and I think they may have test flown it, but they certainly never flew it with a bomb to the U.S. But so that's kind of the genre. And one of the things that people do in either steampunk or diesel punk is they'll make things out of pipes. You can, on a lot of the furniture sites that advertise on places like Facebook now, you can see where they have black pipe that you mount to the wall and use it as a bookshelf. And I got to thinking, I bet that would work for some to hold the curtain rods up. I mean, the pipe fittings and the pipe itself would be stronger than your standard curtain rod hardware. So I went to local hardware store and got some to do a test. I painted it yesterday and I'm letting it dry before I hang it up, but I'm going to put it over one of the windows in the living room, which is the one that is most likely to have somebody climbing on the curtains. I'm not trying too hard to get their attention because they're both sleeping and they're leaving me alone. And we'll see how that works. If that works, then I'm going to do them all that way. So I can have curtains again instead of ripped up blinds that really don't block anything. And that'll also, this winter, since I'm certainly not going to have the money to replace the heating system, that'll enable me to hang heavy comforters over there easily with no worries that, they'll bend the rod. Because that was the problem I had here. On the windows that I tried that would still have curtain rods up. The weight of the comforter pulled them down. Without it, even having somebody climb on them, that just made it worse. So that was my big project, and when I was in the store getting them, I noticed nobody was wearing a fucking mask. It's like everybody thinks the virus is gone, and it's not. I realize that's not much of a positive note to go out on into Skullbeard and I reading more religious gibberish, but I think you can kind of understand my little rage and anger here. Anyways, let's get to that nightmare and hopefully we'll have some good news. And I need to interject here before we get to everything. I've just finished editing the file and discovered that there's some problems with Skullbeard's audio for some reason. He's a little low in the mix. I've done my best to correct it. Hopefully it won't be too awful. We do have a slight problem in that the next episode, because this one had some technical issues, so when we made the recording, we talked, we did it for a while, and we stopped, and I called him back. Well, in the one I called him back, you cannot hear him at all for some reason. I mean, his voice is barely there. So, and I've tried to fix it, and there's nothing I can do. So we're going to have to re-record that. Unless he still has the recording he made on his end, and the audio and that is fine. If it is, then we'll use that. If not, we'll have to re-record. Not that this will impact your listening pleasure in any way. But I just wanted to mention that in case he happens to listen to this before he checks messages from me about him having that file or not. And this episode is not atrocious, I will say, after listening to it. Although there is yet another long and drawn-out death scene. So that sucks. And unfortunately, because of the complications, it made this episode a little shorter than I would have liked. So that's partially why I'm here babbling now. One is to let you know, of course, that there's going to be some audio problems. And the second is just to pad this out to get it closer to an hour, because it was only 45 minutes when all was said and done. And since many of you are paying for this, I don't want to shortchange you. So that this whole time isn't wasted and you're gnashing your teeth wanting me to get to the really shitty stuff, I will describe the biggest controversy in town that happened this past week. Actually today, as a matter of fact. The Tennessean, which is the largest newspaper in the state, published a full-page ad from some whacked-out religious group that claims Islamic terrorists are planning on detonating a nuclear weapon in Nashville. Now, this is absurd for a number of reasons. I mean, aside from the obvious Islamophobia, there's no benefit to nuking Nashville. We are not a major city in the way something like New York is, or Los Angeles, and we're also not a good military target because there's no military things here. I know in Columbus, Ohio, the U.S. military had or has a massive distribution center. We don't have anything like that here as far as the military is concerned. I mean, if you were going to nuke Tennessee, the place to do it would be Knoxville or Oak Ridge. Well, they're kind of close together, but I mean, Oak Ridge, that's where we built the bomb during World War II. That would really fuck with people. So why pick Nashville? Because that's where the fuck jobs who took the ad out are located. And apparently the editorial staff had no idea that that ad was going to be running. According to someone on Facebook who's worked in the newspapers, they say most likely what happened is the paper has their editorial division and their ad division, and the two never talk, and whomever was running the ad division had a page to fill and was butting up against the deadline, and rather than just looking for specific things, they just grabbed the first ad that was full page and put it on there. I don't know if that's true or not, but everybody just about is upset at the Tennessean for that ad. I need to check and see what my brother has to say about it, since he's a raging racist asshole, all heightened by Trump, I might add, and see if he buys it or if he thinks it's bullshit. I have a depressing feeling that he probably thinks it's bullshit, or buys it, rather. I don't know. And it's getting a little late in the evening, and that's why I'm kind of babbling. So, one other thing I will say before we shuffle off to Skullbeard and that nightmare is that Trump is being trolled on Twitter by all these various acts who managed to sell out the stadium that he was unable to even put half the people in the seats. That's just fucking hysterical that they're doing that. And I need to point out that the way the tickets were distributed, had 19,000 people shown up, they all could have gotten in regardless of how many tickets were released. But they didn't, which means you had people not showing up because they were afraid of getting the coronavirus, because they didn't like him, or because they thought that it was just going to be too crowded, or a combination of the three. So the kids selling the tickets, or getting the tickets, didn't really screw anyone out of getting a seat, but they sure embarrassed Trump because his people were all saying, oh, we've sold 1 million, or we've released 1 million tickets, we've got all this stuff. Come to find out that no, they actually only got definite data on just over 6,000 people, and there were, I'm sure, some number who intended to go but had to cancel at the last minute for whatever reason. But still, they didn't get what they thought they were going to get, and what they bragged they were going to get, which is hysterical. And I hope Melania is keeping her bedroom door locked, because if not, he's beating the fuck out of her. So, because if you have not seen the video of him getting off the helicopter at the White House and just walking towards the White House, oh, it's a thing to see. He is so pissed. It almost looked like he'd been crying. I'm sure somebody will write a tell-all book about it afterwards and let us know the details on that. Okay, with all this out of the way, let's get to Skullbeard and I dealing with, it's another thing with the Acts of John, but it's not titled the Acts of John. And there's not a lot of overlap in the content, I'll tell you that. Though, spoiler alert, John's death scene is kind of elaborate again.
Okay, so the Acts of the Holy Apostle and Evangelist John the Theologian about his exile and departure. When Agrippa, whom on account of his plotting against peace they stoned and put to death, was king of the Jews, Vespasian Caesar, coming with a great army, invested Jerusalem, and some prisoners of war he took and slew, others he destroyed by famine in the siege, and most he banished, and at length scattered up and down, and having destroyed the temple, and put the holy vessels on board a ship, he sent them to Rome to make for himself a temple of peace, and adorned it with spoils of war.
Right, so that puts this somewhere between 69 and 79 CE. Because that's when Vespasian was emperor.
Alright, so that's basically when they were writing the Bible.
Well,
alright.
When some people say they were writing the Bible, I still have a hard time accepting the idea that they were that there were any first century manuscripts. I think they were all second century. I know that's all we have.
Yeah, well, there's no consensus on the actual dates.
Yeah. And when Vespasian was dead, his son Domitian, having got possession of the kingdom, along with his other wrongful acts, set himself also to make a persecution against the righteous men. For, having learned that the city was filled with Jews, remembering the orders given by his father about them, he proposed casting them all out of the city of the Romans. And some of the Jews took courage and gave Domitian a book, in which was written as follows.
O Domitian, Caesar and King of all the world, as many of us are Jews, entreat thee, as supplicants we beseech of thy power not to banish us from thy divine and benignant countenance. For we are obedient to thee in the customs and the laws and the practices and policy, doing wrong in nothing but because of the same mind with the Romans. But there is a new and strong nation, neither agreeing with other nations, nor consenting to the religious observances of the Jews, uncircumcised, inhuman, lawless, subverting whole houses, proclaiming a man as God. Oh, I'm getting a little persecution complex vibe here.
Yeah.
All assembling together under a strange name, that of Christian. These men bring no heed to the law given by him, and proclaim to be the Son of God, a man of ourselves, Jesus by name, whose parents and brothers and all his family have been connected with the Hebrews, whom on account of his great blasphemy and his wicked fooleries we gave up to the cross. And they add another blasphemous lie to their first one. Him that was nailed up and buried they glorify as having risen from the dead, and more than this, they falsely assert that he has been taken up by clouds into the heavens. Nice.
And we have to point out that there's no way this would have ever gone to a Roman emperor, because they did not allow you to bury people who had been crucified.
Yep.
So, at all this, the king, being affected with rage, ordered the Senate to publish a decree that they should put to death all who confessed themselves to be Christians. Those, then, who were found in the time of his rage, and who reaped the fruit of patience, were crowned in the triumphant contest against the works of the devil, received the repose of incorruption. So I guess they were killed. Although, historically, that didn't happen either. There weren't large numbers of Christians killed by the Romans.
Yeah. There's that persecution complex thing.
Yep.
Still. And the fame of the teaching of John was spread abroad in Rome, and it came to the ears of Domitian that there was a certain Hebrew in Ephesus, John by name, who spread a report about the seat of empire of the Romans, saying that it would quickly be rooted out and that the kingdoms of the Romans would be given over to another. And Domitian, troubled by what was said, sent a centurion with soldiers to seize John and bring him. And having gone to Ephesus, they asked where John 54'd? I have no idea what that means. And having come up to his gate, they found him standing before the door, and thinking that he was the porter, they inquired of him where John 54'd. That's fucking weird.
Yeah.
And he answered and said, I am he. And they, despising his common and low and poor appearance, were filled with threats and said, Tell us the truth. And when he declared again that he was the man they sought, the neighbors, moreover, bearing witness to it, they said that he was to go with them at once to the king in Rome. And urging them to take provisions for the journey, he turned and took a few dates, and straightway went forth. Squeeze in a few dates.
Oh, yeah. And the soldiers, having taken the public conveyances, traveled fast, having seated him in the midst of them. And when they came to the first change, it being the hour of breakfast, they entreated him to be of good courage, and to take bread and eat with them. And John said, I rejoice in soul indeed, but in the meantime I do not wish to take any food. And they started, and were carried along quickly. And when it was evening, they stopped at a certain inn, and, as besides, it was the hour of supper, the centurion and the soldiers, being most kindly disposed, entreated John to make use of what was set before them. But he said that he was very tired, and in want of sleep more than any food. And as he did this each day, all the soldiers were struck with amazement, and were afraid lest John should die and involve them in danger. But the Holy Spirit showed him to them as more cheerful. And on the 7th day, it being the Lord's day, he said to them, Now it is time for me also to partake of food. And having washed his hands and face, he prayed and brought out the linen cloth, and took one of the dates and ate it in the sight of all. Man, if I haven't eaten in 7 days, the last thing I want to do is eat a piece of fruit.
You do get that sugar rush.
Yeah, but
you want something a little more substantial.
Yeah, you'll get stomach cramps real quick.
Mm-hmm. And when they had ridden a long time, they came to the end of their journey, John fasting, and they brought him before the king and said, Worshipful king, we bring to thee John, a god, not a man, for from the hour in which we apprehended him to the present he has not tasted bread. At this, Domitian, being amazed, stretched out his mouth on account of the wonder, wishing to salute him with a kiss, but John bent down his head and kissed his breast. And Domitian said, Why hast thou done this? Didst thou not think me worthy to kiss thee? And John said to him, It is right to adore the hand of God first of all, and in this way to kiss the mouth of the king, for it is written in the holy book, The heart of a king is in the hand of God. Okay. Divine right of kings or some such nonsense?
Yeah. And the king said to him, Art thou John, who said that my kingdom would speedily be uprooted, and that another king, Jesus, was going to reign instead of me? And John answered and said to him, Thou also shalt reign for many years given thee by God, and after thee very many others. And when the times of the things upon earth have been fulfilled, out of heaven shall come a king, eternal and true, judge of living and dead, to whom every nation and tribe shall confess, through whom every earthly power
and dominion shall be brought to nothing, and every mouth speaking great things shall be shut. This is the mighty Lord and King of everything that hath breath and flesh, the Word and Son of the living one, who is Jesus Christ.
Wait.
Okay. Setting them up for a big one here, I think.
Yep.
At this, Domitian said to him, "What is the proof of these things?" I'm starting to like this guy. I am not persuaded by words only. Words are a sight of the unseen. What canst thou show in earth or heaven by the power of him who is destined to reign, as thou sayest, for he will do it if he is the Son of God? And immediately John asked for a deadly poison. And the king, having ordered poison to be given to him, they brought it on the instant. John, therefore, having taken it, put it into a large cup and filled it with water and mixed it and cried out with a loud voice and said, "In thy name, Jesus Christ, Son of God, I drink the cup which thou wilt sweeten, and the poison in it do thou mingle with thy Holy Spirit, and make it become a draught of life and salvation for the healing of soul and body, for digestion and harmless assimilation, for faith not to be repented of, for an undeniable testimony of death as the cup of thanksgiving." And when he had drunk the cup, those standing beside Domitian expected that he was going to fall to the ground in convulsions. And when John stood cheerful and talked with them safe, Domitian was enraged against those who had given the poison, as having spared John. But they swore by the fortune and health of the king, and said that there could not be a stronger poison than this. And John, understanding what they were whispering to one another, said to the king, "Do not take it ill, O king, but let a trial be made, and thou shalt learn the power of the poison. Make some condemned criminal be brought from the prison." And when he had come, John put water into the cup and swirled it round and gave it with all the dregs to the condemned criminal. And he, having taken it and drunk, immediately fell down and died. Okay, this guy's a dick.
Yeah. And when all wondered at the signs that had been done, and when Domitian had retired and gone to his palace, John said to him,
"O Domitian, King of the Romans, didst thou contrive this, that, thou being present and bearing witness, I might today become a murderer? What is to be done about the dead body which is lying?"
And he ordered it to be taken away. But John, going up to the dead body, said,
"O God, maker of the heavens, Lord and master of the angels, of glories, of powers, in the name of Jesus Christ, thine only begotten Son, give to this man who has died for this occasion a renewal of life, and restore him his soul, that Domitian may learn that the word is much more powerful than poison, and is the ruler of life, and having taken him by the hand, he raised him up alive." This is a far less verbose version of the last shit we read.
Yep. I seem to recall a lot more people dying in the last one, too.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not that far into it. And when all were glorifying God and wondering at the faith of John, Domitian said to him, "I have put forth a decree of the Senate, that all such persons shall be summarily dealt with without trial. But since I find from thee that they are innocent, that their religion is rather beneficial, I banish thee to an island, that I may not seem myself to do away with my own decrees." He asked then that the condemned criminal should be let go, and when he was let go, John said, "Depart, give thanks to God, who has this day delivered thee from prison and from death." All right.
And while they were standing, a certain homeborn slave, that's pretty much where everyone was born way back then. They didn't really have maternity wards. Of Domitian's, of those in the bedchamber, was suddenly seized by the unclean demon, as opposed to the clean demon. I guess the unclean one liked pork, and lay dead, and word was brought to the king. And the king was moved, and entreated John to help her. Ah, okay. Ha ha ha. His side piece dropped dead. That's the problem. And John said, "It is not in man to do this, but since thou knowest how to reign, but dost not know from whom thou hast received it, learn who has the power over both thee and thy kingdom." And he prayed thus, "O Lord, the God of every kingdom, and master of every creature, give to this maiden," no, I don't think she was, "the breath of life." And having prayed, he raised her up, and Domitian, astonished at all the wonders, sent him away to an island, appointing for him a set time. A set time for what?
I have no idea. And straightway John sailed to Patmos, where also he was deemed worthy to see the revelation of the end. Oh, is that where he wrote his fever dream? And when Domitian was dead, Nerva succeeded to the kingdom and recalled all who had been banished, and having kept the kingdom for a year, he made Trajan his successor in the kingdom. And when he was king over the Romans, John went to Ephesus and regulated all the teaching of the church, holding many conferences and reminding them of what the Lord had said to them, and what duty he had assigned to each. And when he was old and changed, he ordered Polycarp to be bishop over the church.
Oh, God. And what his end...
I know. You get the long one.
Yeah, and what his end was like, or his departure from men, who cannot give an account of. For on the following day, which was the Lord's day, and in the presence of the brethren, he began to say to them, "Brethren and fellow servants, and co-heirs, and co-partners of the kingdom of the Lord, know the Lord what miracles he hath shown you through me, what wonders, what cures, what signs, what gracious gifts, teachings, rulings, rests, services, glories, graces, gifts, faiths, communions. How many things have you seen with your eyes that ear hath not heard?" Well, that's usually how it works. The eye sees something, but the ears don't hear it because visual, not audio. Okay? Be strong, therefore, in him, remembering him in all your doings, knowing the mystery of the dispensation that has come to men, for the sake of which the Lord has worked. He then through me exhorts you, "Brethren, I wish to remain without grief, without insult, without treachery, without punishment, for he also knows insult from you. He knows also dishonor. He knows also treachery. He knows also punishment from those that disobey his commandments. Let not, therefore, our God be grieved, the good, the compassionate, the merciful, the holy, the pure, the undefiled, the only, the one, the immutable, the sincere, the guileless, the slow to anger, bullshit, he that is higher and more exalted than every name that we speak or think of, our God, Jesus Christ." His dad's supposed to be higher, but whatever. "Let him rejoice along with us because we conduct ourselves well. Let him be glad because we live in purity. Let him rust because we behave reverently. Let him be pleased because we live in fellowship. Let him smile because we are sober-minded. Let him be delighted because we love. These things, brethren, I communicate to you, pressing on to the work set before me, already perfected for me by the Lord. For what else have I to say to you? Keep the sureties of your God, keep his presence, that shall not be taken away from you. And if then ye sin no more, he will forgive you what ye have done in ignorance. But if, after ye have known him, and he has had compassion upon you, you sin no more, he will forgive you what ye have done in ignorance. But if, after ye have known him, and he has had compassion upon you, you return to the like courses, even your former offenses will be laid to your charge, and ye shall have no portion or compassion before his face. Wow. Isn't he supposed to die now?
I can always hope. So I looked I looked up Polycarp, 2nd century bishop of the church, 69 to 5 CE. So, yeah, I think you're on with the date there. And when he had said this to them, he thus prayed, Jesus, who didst wreath this crown by thy twinning, who hast inserted these many flowers into the everlasting flower of thy countenance, who hast sown these words among them, be thou thyself the protector and healer of thy people. Thou alone art benignant, and not haughty, alone merciful and kind, although a Saviour and just. Thou who always seest what belongs to all, and art in all, and everywhere present, God, Lord Jesus Christ. I may have to use that as a curse sometime. Who with thy gifts and thy compassion coverest those that hope in thee, who knowest intimately those that everywhere speak against us and blaspheme thy holy name, do thou alone, O Lord, help thy servants with thy watchful care, so be it, Lord.
And
This guy's a bit of a suck up.
Yeah. And having asked bread, he gave thanks, saying, What praise or what sort of offering or what thanksgiving shall we, breaking the bread, invoke but thee only? We glorify the name by which thou hast been called by the Father. Unless, of course, Jesus decides to change it. We glorify the name by which thou hast been called through the Son. We glorify the resurrection which has been manifested to us through thee. Of thee we glorify the seed, the word, the grace, the true pearl, the treasure, the plough, the net, the majesty, the diadem, him called Son of Man for our sakes, the truth, the rest, the knowledge, the freedom, the place of refuge in thee. For thou alone art Lord, the root of immortality, and the fountain of incorruption, and the seed of ages. Thou who hast been called all these for our sakes, that we now, calling upon thee through these, may recognize thine illimitable majesty presented to us by thy presence, that can be seen only by the pure, seen in thine only Son.
And having broken the bread, he gave it to us, praying for each of the brethren that he might be worthy of the Eucharist of the Lord. He also, therefore, having likewise tasted it, said, To me also let there be a portion with you in peace, O beloved. And having thus spoken and confirmed the brethren, he said to Eutyches, also named Varus,
Yeah.
Behold, I appoint thee a minister of the Church of Christ.
And you are going to have to read that over again, I'm afraid. You froze and broke up through a good point of it. I heard Eudes, and then it just...
Fine. Clean edit point. And having broken the bread, he gave it to us, praying for each of the brethren, that he might be worthy of the Eucharist of the Lord. He also, therefore, having likewise tasted it, said, To me also let there be a portion with you in peace, O beloved. And having thus spoken and confirmed the brethren, he said to Eutyches, also named Varus, Behold, I appoint thee a minister of the Church of Christ, and I entrust to thee the flock of Christ. Be mindful thereof, therefore, of the commandments of the Lord, and if thou shouldst fall into trials or dangers, be not afraid, for thou shalt fall under many troubles, and thou shalt be shown to be an eminent witness of the Lord. Thus then, Varus attended to the flock as a servant of God until the time appointed for thy testimony.
Okay. And when John had spoken this, and more than this, having entrusted to him the flock of Christ, he says to him, Take some brethren with baskets and vessels, and follow me, And Eutychus, without considering, did what he was bid. And the blessed John, having gone forth from the house, went outside of the gates, having told the multitude to stand off from him, "Everybody stand back!" And having come to the tomb of one of our brethren, he told them to dig. And they dug. And he says, "Let the trench be deeper." And as they dug, he conversed with those who had come out of the house with him, building them up and furnishing them thoroughly into the majesty of the Lord. And when the young men had finished the trench as he had wished, while we knew nothing, he takes off the clothes he had on and throws them as if they were some bedding into the depth of the trench, and standing only in his drawers, stretched forth his hands and prayed. Oh, goody.
Have we not heard this story before, more or less?
Yeah, but this is a little more succinct. Until this paragraph.
I do appreciate their brevity, but not at this moment. O God, who has chosen us for the mission of the Gentiles, who has sent us out into the world, who hast declared thyself through the apostles, who hast never rested, but always savest from the foundations of the world, who hast made thyself known through all nature, who hast made our world, our wild and savage nature quiet and peaceable, who hast given thyself to it when thirsting after knowledge, who hast put to death its adversary when it took refuge in thee, who hast given it thy hand and raised it from the things done in Hades, who hast shown it its own enemy, who hast in purity turned its thoughts upon thee, O Christ Jesus, Lord of all things in heaven and law on earth, the course of the things aerial, the guardian of things ethereal, the fear of those under the earth, and grace of thine own people, receive also the soul of thy John, which has been certainly deemed worthy by thee, thou who hast preserved me also till the present hour, pure to thyself, and free from intercourse with women, poor bastard, who, when I wished in my youth to marry, didst appear to me and say, I am in need of thee, John, who didst strengthen for me beforehand my bodily weakness, who, when a third time I wished to marry, didst say to me at the third hour in the sea, John, if thou wert not mine, I would let thee marry, who hast opened up the sight of my mind and hast favored my bodily eyes, who, when I was looking about me, didst call even the gazing upon a woman hateful, who didst deliver me from temporary show and preserve me for that which endureth forever, who didst separate me from the filthy madness of the flesh. If I'm not mistaken, this has all been one fucking sentence.
Yeah, you're right.
Who did stop up the secret disease of the soul and cut out its open actions, who didst afflict and banished him who rebelled in me, who didst establish my love to thee spotless and unimpaired, who didst give me undoubting faith in thee, who hast drawn out for me pure thoughts toward thee, who hast given me the due reward of my works, who hast set it in my soul to have no other possession than thee alone. For what is more precious than thou? Now, O Lord, when I have accomplished thy stewardship, with which I was entrusted, make me worthy of thy repose, having wrought that which is perfect in thee, which is ineffable salvation. Finally, a fucking period. And as I go to thee, let the fire withdraw, let darkness be overcome, let the furnace be slackened, let Gehenna be extinguished, let the angels follow, let the demons be afraid, let the princes be broken in pieces, let the powers of darkness fall, let the places on the right hand stand firm, let those on the left abide not. Let the devil be muzzled, let Satan be laughed to scorn, let his madness be tamed, let his wrath be broken, let his children be trodden under foot, and let all his root be uprooted, and grant to me to accomplish the journey to thee, not insulted, not despitefully treated, and to receive what thou hast promised to those that live in purity, and that thou lived a holy life. Woof. That's fucking brutal.
Yeah. And gazing towards heaven, he glorified God, and having sealed himself altogether, he stood and said to us, Peace and grace be with you, brethren, and sent the brethren away. And when they went on the morrow, they did not find him, but his sandals and a fountain welling up. And after that they remembered what had been said to Peter by the Lord about him. For what does it concern thee if I should wish him to remain until I come? And they glorified God for the miracle that had happened, and having thus believed, they retired, praising and blessing the benignant God, because to him is due glory now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen.
Yeah, that's another very likely story.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fuzz-Nuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.